Scotland and the Wallabies, 15 points to 13. Proper test match between these two teams. We'll go through the key events, some of the stats, and you guys can let me know your thoughts on how this game was. I've watched it delayed. It was on at 3 odd o'clock here in New Zealand, so I watched it when I got up in the morning. Thankfully, I didn't know the result because it went right down to the wire. Only 3 tries in the game, but like numerous like pinpoint kicks, some that weren't. Try-saving tackles and HIAs, cards. So, yeah, pretty entertaining game all round. I thought multiple lead changes as well, which tends to make for a pretty entertaining product. Interestingly, Aussie had a shot at goal relatively early, and James O'Connor, who hasn't played a heck of a lot of rugby in recent times, it's been Quade Cooper, who is not available, no longer with the squad at the moment, who's been running the show. And Jock's first penalty went well wide, and his first kind of kick from hand as well looked a bit ugly, so it seemed like maybe just a little bit of rust for James O'Connor. And in the scheme of things, it's a pretty costly missed kick, but you wouldn't know that when it's only 5 minutes into the game. Both sides were looking to play with a pretty high tempo, which was fun to see. You know, both sides kind of taking quick tap penalties rather than trying to set up anything too structured. Seemingly early, Hooper and I think Graham it was, taking quick taps for each side, trying to catch the other unawares. Unfortunately, both sides had guys go off as well, kind of relatively early on in the piece. Turner had to go off on about 11 minutes, so Ashman came on for his first test cap, and like no pressure, it's still 0-0, and you've got about 70 minutes of rugby to go on your debut. So yeah, pressure on the young man for sure. But yeah, I think he did all right, didn't he? Scored a try, and the line-out operated well. Penalties were going both ways initially at scrum time, although the Scots did kind of get the upper hand in that area, albeit with the Wallabies having a few issues with guys going off the field. Scotland had a 5-metre line-out on 15 minutes, and the Aussie defence kind of held. And then the next minute after the Aussies had hacked it through, Hogg was having to scramble in his own end goal. So it was kind of end-to-end, literally end-to-end stuff. There was a moment where they had to check if Hogg had actually grounded the ball in his in goal because he popped the pass up, but they ruled that he had. So Aussie 5-metre scrum, and it was Scotland's defence turn to hold, but they did. So, 20 odd minutes, you've got no try scoring. It's both defences kind of shutting each other down, which is, I don't know, I find that a good watch when you see these guys that are surely going to break and then, it gets snaffled by a key tackle or something like that. 21 minutes though, Scotland had a chance to maybe opt for 3, but they decided not to. They opted for the touchline. It's a 5-metre line out, and it was a try, and it was a proper thing of beauty. The Hamish Watson try on 22 minutes. Because I think the Wallabies were set to stop the maul where the jumper took it, but they threw the ball back down to kind of a former secondary pod, so an alternate point of contact, and then they drove over from there. The Aussies just couldn't set in time, so it was a really kind of well-rehearsed piece of a set play, straight from the training ground, that one, and it worked perfectly. Unfortunately, the TMO tried to get involved to have a look at it, and the ref was not having a bar of it. Romain Poit in his last game was like, no. And sometimes, you get that nostalgic feeling if you watch really old games where there's no TMO and it's really free-flowing. I mean, part of my mind probably forgets there used to be some real howlers that didn't get picked up when we didn't have TMOs. That's kind of why we did bring in TMOs. But that kind of nonsense is a different kind of annoying. So, yeah, the TMO has a look, ref shuts him down, and, they give the try eventually. So it's 7-0 to Scotland, good conversion. Ikito has a nice touch finder for the Wallabies. It puts them 5 metres out, but they're still scoreless after, half an hour. Eventually, they did look to have gone over on 35 minutes. I say look to have gone over because it gets called back. It's a Wallabies maul, which wins a penalty, and then they kick for touch. Obviously, they maul it again because they've had some success, but the Scottish defence holds better. I guess they've had a look at it the first time and corrected their mistakes. But that being said, the Wallabies, a couple of phases later, Fainga pulls off, he peels off and has a crack, and he gets shut down. Hooper eventually goes over from close range, but the TMO gets on the wire and says that there's a dangerous clean out from Ala Alatoa, and it's a swinging arm. And it's one of those ones where it's like, it's a tough call, but technically right, because you can't touch guys in the head. I mean, Hooper was incredulous. The crowd loved it. And it's one of those ones, if it's happening to your team, you're probably pretty peed off. But, yeah, man, like there's no real need to clean him out there. He's off his feet. He's not involved. He's just a tackler who's not really allowed. If he touches anything, he's going to get pinged anyway. So maybe just leave well enough alone. Just get there and protect your ball. Just goes a touch too far. And interestingly, the try gets chalked off. As I mentioned, Hooper's peed off. And if you're an Aussie fan, I would imagine you'd be peed off. I'm sure if I talked to my old man about it, he'd be really peed off and say it was ridiculous. But it's a difference between the Aussie commentary team and the New Zealand commentary team. I don't know if you guys outside New Zealand probably didn't get the New Zealand feed for the New Zealand-Italy game, but if you didn't watch it, New Zealand weren't playing all that well. And the New Zealand commentators were just like your dad next to you on the couch going, oh, come on, he's not supporting his body weight. He's offside. Like, they were Justin Marshall, especially, was being a bit of a fanboy. And I don't mind Justin Marshall too much. A lot of Kiwis can't stand him. But yeah, they were kind of getting on the one-eyed bandwagon, appealing to their audience. Whereas the Aussie commentary team I had did not complain one bit about it. They basically said, yep, he made a mistake. He shouldn't have been touching him in the head, albeit as minor as it was. So the referee says there's no force, tries disallowed, and Ala Alatoa gets yellow carded. So it's tough, as I mentioned, but it's one that didn't need to happen. So there you go. Unfortunate for the Aussies. But that being said, maybe they're fired up by that yellow card because they do really well during the yellow card. They kick a penalty to make it 7-3 at halftime. And then second half, it does get a bit worse because Tupou, who's come on for Ala Alatoa as the reserve tight head, he has a big clash with Sam Johnson and goes off for an HIA. Doesn't come back on. He looked pretty groggy. I'll be surprised if he's ready for England next week because I think it's a 6-day turnaround. And then, so Slipper has to move to tight head, which is not his usual position because Ala Alatoa is still in the bin. And yeah, you're thinking, man, the Aussie scrum's going to be under pressure. And it does kind of prove that way a bit later. But for this moment, the Aussies set a really nice scrum. Easier on your own ball when you can try and kind of get it out quickly. Parise, who's come on, has a good run. And then next carry, it's Leota who goes over for their try. So they score 10 points during the yellow card, which is, like I'm saying, maybe they were just properly fired up. So they win the period where they've got the man down 10 points to nil. So from a Scotland point of view, that's actually pretty disappointing. Pretty poor management of the yellow card period. Speaking of poor, like Tom Wright gives away a really dumb penalty for hassling Stuart Hogg when I think he's like got the option of maybe taking a quick line out, the kind of bit of pushing and shoving. The ref just pings him. The softest of soft penalties that you don't need to be doing. You kind of get yourself into trouble with that. But Paisami got him out of trouble by winning a pretty key turnover not long later. Russell, I think, hit a really nice 50-22, proper kick with a wicked bounce, goes into touch. That saw Nick White have to put in a phenomenal try-saving tackle on Duan van der Merwe. Duan looked like he was gone, but White got him around the legs, which is the way to bring the big man down. And Alatoa has to go off for an HIA. At that point, I'm really getting worried, not just for this week, but for next week, because if the Aussies, again, with the short turnaround, have got two tight heads off, for a kind of week stand down or whatever with the concussion protocols, then yeah, pretty concerned for them. So Slipper has to move back to tight head, and Scotland, ruthless, man. They don't let up. They turn the screws. They call for scrums when these two tight heads are off the field. So yeah, Slipper is getting dominated. He gets his knee on the ground. They concede one penalty. Scotland go for a scrum again, and the second time you end up with Ashman getting a try in the corner. He must have been a winger at some point in his junior career because the way he gets his body off the ground to make sure his feet aren't in touch as Parise's tackling him is proper good stuff. And White, when he's speaking to the TMO about it, even uses the words, he's flying. So, yeah, there you go. Try on debut for him. They missed the conversion, so it's 12 points to 10. Still very much game on. The Wallabies went back in front, so the lead keeps chopping and changing on 64. Scotland player got pinged at the breakdown, so it was 13-12. Ala Alatoa fortunately came on, so they do have a proper tight head on the field, but they did keep conceding scrum penalties, and that allowed Russell to kick one over, so 15-13. That's the final score, but there's still about, 15 minutes to play? Maybe 10? The Wallabies on 74 did put in a massive scrum, which is not always easy to do when the refs already kind of got the picture that you are the weaker pack. But they managed to win a big scrum penalty, and the Scotland defence still held. They got a really good strip in the tackle, so it took the fire out of the Aussie momentum. They countered, but then Russell's cross kick went into touch on the full, so too big. The real last chance for the Aussies was when Scotland gave away a dumb penalty of their own. Was it Ashman? So one of the guys kind of jumped over a maul, and the ref was like, nah, you're not having that. Just dangerous play. And then, the Aussies got that penalty, but missed touch. That miss of touch was their kind of last chance to set an attacking play with 2 minutes to go. And, Scotland from there, they basically see out the game. The Wallabies concede a breakdown penalty. Scotland kick for touch. Win the line out and kick the ball out. So game over. So well done, man. It's, like I said, a proper test match. 3 tries. All of them pretty well worked. All kind of impressive for their own reason. A loose head playing tight head to sort out Leota's try. And Ashman on debut. Wingers try in the corner and a really nice line out set play. So really kind of top quality tries all round. Run meters is 338 to 256. Possession and territory are split. Scotland had the possession. Wallabies had the territory. Tackling percentages are both in the 80s, although Scotland are high 80s, Wallabies are low. Scotland had to make a few more tackles, though, with 103 to 95 for the Wallabies. Turnovers conceded a little touch high, 16 by Scotland, 12 by the Wallabies. That's an area for improvement. There were a few kind of errors in the game. Clean breaks, though, we talked about that in the preview, 4 to 2, so kept relatively low. Talked about the fact that the Wallabies don't concede a lot of clean breaks except when they play New Zealand, and they limited Scotland to 4. Scotland usually get 10 plus, so that was kind of a mark of approval for the Wallabies defence, but likewise for the Scots for keeping the Wallabies doubly quiet as well, only conceding 2 clean breaks. Penalties conceded 12 to 14 is not the lowest, not the highest of the weekend by any means. Individuals. Watson, 13 from tackles from him, plus a try. So good shift. Rodder had 10 from 11 in his 80 minutes. It was Skelton and Arnold that were the other 2 locks. They kind of chopped and changed. Maybe didn't quite have the impact they would have liked. Just got an email. Or is that a reminder? Both the Scotland wingers had 50 plus run meters and beat 4 defenders, so looking dangerous. Bit disappointed again. The Aussie midfield between the 2 of them beats 1 defender. That's not including Parise, starting midfield. Parise looked maybe to bulk it up a bit. Maybe he needs to be the guy if he's going to replace Karevi. Because, when he's not there, Paisami and Ikita are both good players, but they can't kind of crash ball like you need to. So, a little bit concerning. I think Poit had fun in his last game. Had a few jokes and high fives and smiles. So, good for him. End his career with a pretty well-controlled game. Told the referee, the TMO to kind of bugger off at one point. So, good on him. But, Wallabies have got England next week, which is going to be a tough ask, especially if Tupou is indeed not going to be available. We'll have to wait and see what happens with that. But he was pretty groggy when he took that clash. So, pretty unfortunate for Scotland. They've got South Africa, so it's not going to get any easier, and you won't get an easy scrum. I'm not saying the Wallabies were easy, but there were a couple of times when you had loose head playing tight head and you were able to turn the screws. South African scrums, big time, pretty tough. So, could be an interesting game as well. Also, if you know about the kind of hypothetical Rayburn Shield, which traces its way back to the first ever game of rugby union played, kind of like a boxer's belt. If you beat the champion, you become the champion. The Wallabies held that hypothetical shield, so now Scotland have got it. So it's a hypothetical virtual trophy shield that Scotland now holds and has to defend against South Africa next week. If you don't know about that, there's a Twitter account which talks about it, but it would be a pretty cool thing to add to rugby at some point. I'm rambling now. I'm going to go. You guys take care, and I will talk to you again soon. See you later.